I just fit 37-inch tires on my bone stock Tundra, and that is a 5-inch increase in tire size. But I did it with no lift and no body mount chop. Yeah, sure, but you will rub when you go in reverse. Huh, that's cool, but I guarantee it to rub when the suspension compresses. Wait, how is that even possible? I'm rubbing on 34s. In this video, I will show you my 3 secrets in fitting larger tires. And for my 37s, all I spent was just a set of wheels and tires. Even if you don't drive the same vehicle as me, the same principles will still help you maximize your tire size. Alright, let's get started. Wheel offset is the distance between the mounting surface to the center of the wheel. A higher offset brings the wheel in, and a lower offset pushes the wheel out. Most aftermarket wheels come with a lower offset for a more aggressive stance. But that is actually one of the biggest causes for tire rubbing. To show you exactly why, I removed the front spring so I could compress the suspension to the tightest spot. And let's start with the 34-inch tire on a positive 50mm offset. When we steer it to the tightest spot to the body mount, we have 1.7 inches of clearance. Now, watch what happens when I add a 2-inch wheel spacer, which has the exact same effect as a 0 offset wheel. The body mount clearance is now down to 0.6. So, of course, if we want to do 37s, this will require a ton of cutting. However, if we go back to the positive 50mm offset, the same 37 perfectly cleared the body mount, and we have a half-inch gap to spare. The 37 also cleared the super tight factory front bumper. This was a pleasant surprise, because many second-gen owners have to trim this corner just to clear 35s. But we didn't need to with 37s. Now, I did slightly rub on the plastic liner. Some heat gun action should make it work, but I just removed it, as I plan to switch out the front bumper anyway. The offset of the wheel has such a big impact, because the front wheel pivots about the steering axis. If the tire sticks out further from this axis, it will swing on the larger arc, which pushes the tire closer to the wheel well both front and rear. A lower wheel offset also increases the scrub radius, which has a negative impact on stress and handling. But in terms of scrub radius, a higher wheel offset is not always better. As you can see, the steering axis is at an angle. So when we increase the tire diameter, we actually need a lower wheel offset to keep the factory scrub radius. Well, that's great. We now have a legit reason to stance our truck. So how much wheel offset should we change? The relationship to tire size is dictated by the steering axis inclination, or SAI. For my second-gen Tundra, that angle is around 13 degrees. So for every 1 inch of tire diameter increase, we should reduce the wheel offset by 0.12 inch, or 3mm. When I go from the factory 32-inch tire all the way to a 37, I only need to reduce the offset from the factory positive 60 to a positive 45. So yeah, it wasn't a big change at all. Most aftermarket wheels stick out way too much. The highest aftermarket offset I could find was a positive 35, but that is still less ideal than the positive 50 on the TRD Rock Warrior wheels. If you want to learn more about the mechanical impacts, check out my last video, which I will link in the description below. And back to tire clearance, if I went with the positive 35mm offset, which we can simulate by stacking some spacers, I will have almost zero margin, and a body mount chop will become necessary. Now, some hardcore guy may say, just cut it, bro. Well, yes, I would cut it if it was a dedicated trail rig. But according to Toyota's technical white paper, this oversized body mount was a deliberate safety feature. Well, if we cut it and weld some stuff back, it'll still do its job, right? Maybe. Now, wheel offset alone will not achieve the clearance we just saw. So let's review my next secret. When upgrading to a taller tire, many also like to go for a wider one. Just like wheel offset, this will also stick out closer to the body mount. But a wider tire also stick out closer to the suspension. And sometimes it will rub the upper control arm. In that case, we kind of have no choice but to run a lower wheel offset. And that again will reduce the body mount clearance. We're basically getting pinched from both sides. Most 37s are either 12.5 or 13.5 inches wide. With my positive 50mm offset, they will rub the UCA. So my tires are actually 37 by 11.5, and this is my secret number 2. As you can see, this 37 was just narrow enough to clear the upper control arm. Now, here's one thing about tire size I want to point out. The width number measures the widest part of the tire, sidewall to sidewall, but that is not usually where it rubs, so we can't really compare tire sizes based on their face values. For example, my 11.5-inch width is equivalent to a 295 in metric size. But if we compare it to this 285/75 R17, the 295 actually has a narrower tread. This is typically a byproduct from a high aspect ratio. On the other extreme, my low-profile Bro Truck tires has an even wider tread, despite also being 285. These tapered shoulders really worked in my favor. When I fully compress the suspension, the narrow 37s tucks perfectly inside the factory fender, both the front and the rear. The wheel well on most cars goes up higher beyond the fender. So by clearing this lip, I was able to maintain full suspension travel on 37s. Another common spot that requires cutting is the pinch weld area. But with my setup, I didn't even touch the plastic liner.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect.
Only when I fully steer the other way do I slightly rub this area of the wheel well liner, behind which is some metal brackets. I might do some massaging down the road, but this is under pretty extreme conditions with the bump stop fully compressed. If I just back it off a little bit, I'm fully cleared. So we'll see if I actually rub in real life. Now, positive offset wheels and narrow tires got me pretty far. But if I simply stop here and do nothing else, I will only have about 1/8 of an inch clearance, which is too little margin to account for bushing deflections like when you're going in reverse. To achieve the 1/2 inch margin I showed earlier, there is one more secret. This one is a little tricky, and I have seen many people doing it wrong and end up hurting their tire clearance. But before we dive into that, I want to give a big shout out to OK 4-Wheel Drive for providing me with these narrow 37s. OK 4-Wheel Drive has been in business since 1979. To put that into context, it was just 3 years after B.F. Goodrich invented the first ever all-terrain tire. Now that is some true 4-wheel drive heritage. Today, OK 4-Wheel Drive has a huge selection of modern off-road tires, and they are an expert in mounting and balancing oversized tires. And they do way more than just tires. From serious off-road mods to fancy overland accessories, OK 4-Wheel Drive does it all. With literally decades of real-world expertise, OK 4-Wheel Drive has worked on a tons of cool builds. So go subscribe to their YouTube channel and check them out. I would like to thank OK 4-Wheel Drive for supporting my channel. Okay, let's talk about the third secret, suspension settings. When I say suspension, you might think we're going to talk about suspension lift. But no, a taller ride height only temporarily clears the tires driving on flat ground. The tire will go back up when the suspension cycles. That's why throughout this video, we've always checked clearance with the suspension compressed. The real secret is to shift the tire forward, and we can do so using the lower control arm alignment bolts. By going from the factory neutral setting to maximum forward, we increase the body mount clearance from 1/8 of an inch to around 0.7, which makes a big difference. But remember, I was actually rubbing in the front under extreme conditions, so I actually dialed it back slightly to about 1/2 inch gap from the body mount. And this is the setting I've been showing throughout this video. Now, when we move the lower ball joint forward, we also increase the caster angle. So many people associate a high caster with more body mount clearance. And when they shop for aftermarket upper control arms, many will go with the ones that market high caster. But this is a big mistake because changing caster through the upper has the direct opposite effect. To illustrate this precisely, I got a set of SPC adjustable upper control arms from OK 4-Wheel Drive, so that I can easily put on different caster settings to simulate all the brands out there. Starting from the factory settings, to increase caster, the upper ball joint has to move backwards, and so does the tire. At 3 degrees of caster over stock, the body mount clearance reduced from the 1/2 inch to about 1/8. Basically, it undid what we gained from the lower control arm. But in reality, adding 3 degrees of caster is exactly many non-adjustable, quote-unquote, high caster UCAs are designed to do. And it can get even worse. If you only have about 2.5 inch lift, running UCA like that will result in too much overall caster. So during a wheel alignment, the lower control arm will actually need to be adjusted backwards to bring the caster angle back down. As you can see, this sends the 37 straight into the wheel well, a huge difference from our previous setting. And all we changed is the alignment. Now, if we throw in 0 offset wheels on top of a bad alignment, we can actually make a 34-inch tires rub very badly. But this is exactly what's happening on many trucks out there. I'm rubbing on 34s. This is why what's the biggest tire I can fit without a body mount chop has so many contradicting opinions. But as you can see, with the correct setting, one can actually clear 37s with no lift and no body mount chop. Now, I was a little worried that the narrower stance would look bad on a Tundra. But you know what? It actually looks pretty good. And with near factory scrub radius and a narrow contact patch, these 37s are surprisingly easy to steer. This forged alloy wheel and skinny tires are surprisingly lightweight. Each combo weighs only 96 pounds. It was actually 7 pounds lighter than my bro truck wheel on 33. Pretty crazy, right? Even for a 37, I was still able to pick it right up. In fact, I have mounted and dismounted this tire over 20 times when filming this video.
Exercise ring closed.
Okay, I have to confess, there is actually one more area I rub that I haven't told you yet. This setup does rub the front sway bar. Well, no, it does not. Removing the front sway bar was already part of my plan, but for a different reason. I will show you all about that in a future video. Removing the sway bar will sacrifice drivability, but don't worry, I also have a plan to address exactly that. So subscribe and stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.